Mary Ellen Parker had always believed that kindness could fix anything. At 62, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in North Carolina, she had built a peaceful life after her husband's passing. Her little white house with the blue shutters wasn't just a building. It was her safe place, filled with laughter from her younger days, family dinners, and the smell of apple pie on Sundays. Her son, Ethan, had grown up in that house. He used to chase fireflies in the backyard and fall asleep on the couch during movie nights. Mary had worked 2 jobs after her husband died, cleaning houses in the morning and working part-time at a local diner in the evenings, just to keep the mortgage paid off. When she finally owned the home free and clear, she cried tears of pride. That home was her reward for a lifetime of sacrifice. Then Ethan got married. At first, Mary was overjoyed. Her son had found love. When she met Rebecca, she tried hard to welcome her like a daughter. Rebecca was beautiful, confident, and ambitious, a real estate agent with a perfect smile and expensive taste. Mary baked her favorite pies, offered family recipes, even gave her her late husband's old watch as a welcome to the family gesture. But Rebecca never seemed to like her. Little things started to happen. Subtle comments, quiet looks. When Mary would visit, Rebecca would suddenly remember she had errands. When Mary offered to help with the baby, Rebecca would say, "It's okay, we've got it under control." Still, Mary believed that time could heal everything. She told herself Rebecca just needed space. After all, newlyweds needed their own rhythm. But then Ethan lost his job. The company he worked for downsized, and suddenly their rent in Charlotte became too high. Ethan called one night, his voice heavy with embarrassment. "Mom, we need a place to stay for a little while. Just until I find something new." Mary didn't hesitate. "Of course, sweetheart. This is your home too." She cleaned out the guest room, washed the sheets twice, and made a list of favorite meals Ethan liked when he was little. For the first few weeks, things were fine. She loved waking up to the sound of her grandson's laughter. The house felt alive again, but soon Rebecca's tone started to shift. She began rearranging the kitchen, putting things where she wanted them. She'd say things like, "Mary, this house could look so much better if you let me redecorate a bit." Mary tried to smile. "It's been like this for 30 years, honey. Everything has its place." Rebecca just rolled her eyes. "Maybe it's time for some change." Over the next few weeks, Mary noticed more changes. Her family photos were placed with framed quotes Rebecca liked, her old curtains swapped for modern blinds. Even her late husband's chair was moved out of the living room. When Mary quietly moved it back, Rebecca sighed. "It doesn't really fit the new look, Mary." The tension built like a slow storm. Ethan tried to keep peace between them, but he was tired, constantly searching for work. Rebecca began whispering in his ear, complaining that Mary was too controlling, that they needed privacy, that living with her mother-in-law was emotionally draining. Mary overheard one night. She was walking past the living room when she heard Rebecca say, "Ethan, we need to think long-term. This house isn't hers alone forever. You're her only child. It'll be ours someday anyway. Why not now?" Mary froze behind the door frame, her heart pounding so loudly she thought they'd hear it. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Rebecca smiled like nothing had happened. She made coffee, complimented Mary's sweater, and even called her mom. But something had changed. Mary began noticing that Rebecca was asking a lot of questions about the house deed, the property taxes, the will. It made her uneasy, but she brushed it off, not wanting to cause drama. Then came the day of the slap. It was a Saturday morning. Mary was in her garden, trimming her roses, when Rebecca stormed outside, phone in hand. "Mary," she snapped, "where are the house keys?" Mary blinked. "The keys? They're inside. Why?" "I need them," Rebecca said sharply. "We're changing the locks." It's time this place was managed properly. Mary's heart skipped. Changing the locks. "This is my house," Rebecca's face hardened. "You wouldn't even have this place if it weren't for Ethan helping you with bills back in the day. You're being selfish, holding on to something that should be ours." Mary's voice trembled. "You can't just... This is my home." Rebecca stepped closer. "Give me the keys, Mary." flew out before she even realized it. The sound of the slap cracked through the garden. Mary staggered back, one hand to her cheek. For a moment she couldn't even believe it happened. The birds went silent. The air felt heavy. "Did you just—" she whispered. Rebecca's expression shifted, maybe realizing what she'd done, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she hissed, "You brought this on yourself. Maybe now you'll finally understand boundaries." And she turned, storming back inside. Mary stood there for what felt like forever, her cheek burning, her heart breaking. Something inside her, something quiet and patient for years, snapped. She wasn't just a widow. She wasn't just a mother. She was a woman who had built her life from nothing. And no one was going to take it from her. That night, while Ethan and Rebecca were asleep, Mary sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and a trembling hand. She looked around at the walls she had painted, the curtains she had sewn, the photographs of her life. Tears fell, but this time they weren't from weakness. They were from resolve. Tomorrow she decided she would take back her home, her peace, and her dignity. And no slap in the world could stop her. Mary woke before sunrise. Mary woke before sunrise. Her cheek still ached faintly, but the sting that hurt the most wasn't on her skin. It was deep in her chest. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the pale light creeping through the curtains. For the first time in years, she felt like a stranger in her own home. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. Rebecca's voice still echoed in her head. "This house should be ours." Mary's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee into her favorite chipped mug. It was the one her late husband, Tom, had given her for their 10th anniversary. She traced the faded words on the side. "Home is where love grows." She'd kept that promise all her life, but now love felt like a battle, a plan in silence. When Ethan came into the kitchen later that morning, bleary-eyed and wearing his old work shirt, Mary didn't mention what had happened. He didn't notice the faint redness on her cheek. Or maybe he didn't want to notice. "Morning, Mom," he said, opening the fridge. "We might need to pick up more milk." Mary just nodded, her eyes fixed on her coffee. He looked tired, older than 34. Losing his job had crushed his confidence. He was trying to keep the peace between his wife and his mother, but in doing so, he'd lost his own voice. "Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk later today? Just us?" He hesitated. "Sure, Mom." "After lunch?" She smiled faintly. "After lunch." As soon as he left the kitchen, she pulled out her old address book. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the worn pages until she found a name she hadn't called in years. Linda Grayson, her former neighbor and closest friend. Linda was a retired paralegal, the kind of woman who always knew her way around a legal form. Mary dialed the number, her heart pounding. "Linda," she whispered when the familiar voice answered. "It's Mary. I need your help. Legal lines." 2 hours later, Linda arrived, brisk and no-nonsense as always. She gave Mary a long, knowing look before even sitting down. "What happened?" she asked, voice steady but gentle. Mary tried to explain without breaking down, the slap, the demands, the threats about the house. By the end, Linda's lips had thinned into a hard line. "She laid a hand on you? In your own home?" Mary nodded silently. Linda reached for her hand. "Then it's time to protect yourself. Do you still have your deed?" Mary got up and fetched a small metal lockbox from her closet. Inside were decades of careful saving. Receipts, insurance papers, the house deed with her name in bold black ink. She placed it on the table like a piece of her soul. Linda studied it carefully. "This house is yours outright. Paid off. Legally under your name. Ethan has no claim to it unless you add him to the title, which you haven't. Mary exhaled, relief and disbelief mixing together. So she can't take it? Not legally, Linda said. But emotionally, she's already trying to. People like her, they use control and guilt to get what they want. You need to set boundaries, and if that fails, call the police. Mary flinched. The police? For family? Linda leaned closer. Mary, you're not just a mother. You're a person with rights. Don't let fear keep you prisoner in your own home. Mary nodded slowly, feeling something stir inside her, a strength she hadn't felt in years. The visit to town, the next day, she put on her best sweater, pinned her silver hair neatly, and took the bus into town. She walked into the county clerk's office with quiet determination and asked for a consultation about property protection. The young clerk behind the counter looked surprised at the sight of the polite, gray-haired woman clutching her documents, but she treated Mary kindly. They discussed options, putting the house in a living trust, appointing a power of attorney only to someone she could truly trust, and filing a no trespassing notice if needed. It was overwhelming, but empowering too. When she left the building, she stopped at a small cafe on Main Street. As she sipped her tea, she felt lighter, like she'd taken the first real breath in months. For the first time since that slap, she wasn't afraid. She was preparing, confronting Ethan. That afternoon, she sat down with her son at the kitchen table. Ethan, she began, her tone calm but firm. We need to talk about what happened yesterday. He looked puzzled. What happened? Mary met his eyes. Rebecca hit me. The words hung in the air like thunder. Ethan's face went pale. Mom, no, she wouldn't. She did. In the garden. Because I wouldn't give her my house keys. He rubbed his face, groaning. God, Mom, I'm sure she didn't mean... Don't, Mary said, her voice steady. Don't excuse it. I've been patient, I've been kind, but this ends now. I will not be disrespected or threatened in my own home. Ethan looked torn between loyalty and shame. What are you saying? I'm saying, she continued, that you two need to find your own place. I'll give you 2 weeks to make arrangements. He blinked in disbelief. Mom, we can't just... You can, she said firmly. You're an adult. I love you, Ethan, but this isn't healthy for any of us. Ethan's voice cracked. Rebecca's not going to like this. Mary looked at him sadly. Then maybe she'll finally understand that not everything in life bends to what she likes. Rebecca's reaction. That evening, when Ethan told Rebecca, the house erupted. From her bedroom, Mary could hear Rebecca's angry voice rising like a storm. She's throwing us out. Us? After everything we've done for her? Done for her. The irony cut deep. Rebecca stormed into the hallway, eyes blazing. You think you can just kick us out, Mary? This is Ethan's home, too. Mary stood her ground. Ethan grew up here, but the deed is mine. You will both leave peacefully, or I'll have the sheriff help you. Rebecca's mouth fell open. She had expected tears, guilt, maybe pleading, not this calm defiance. You wouldn't dare. Mary met her gaze evenly. Try me. For the first time, Rebecca had no words. She turned, muttering something under her breath, and slammed the door. Mary leaned against the wall, her heart pounding, but she didn't cry. She felt strong. She realized that real strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it just stands still and says no more. A whisper of peace. That night, as she locked her bedroom door, a habit she had never needed before, Mary sat by her window. The moonlight fell across the garden, illuminating the rose bushes she had tended for decades. In that quiet glow, she promised herself that she would rebuild her peace, no matter what it took. Tomorrow she would call a locksmith, update her will, and make sure no one ever held power over her again. And if Rebecca thought she could bully her into submission, she was about to learn that Mary Ellen Parker was made of steel, wrapped in kindness. The storm had started. But this time Mary was ready to fight back, with the law, with dignity, and with a lifetime of strength earned the hard way. For the next few days, the air inside the house was electric, tense, charged, and full of quiet hostility. Mary could almost feel the resentment floating through the walls. Ethan barely spoke. He moved around like a ghost, avoiding his mother's eyes. Rebecca, on the other hand, made sure Mary felt her anger in every way possible. The TV would blare late into the night. Dirty dishes were left in the sink on purpose. Her once peaceful home had turned into a battlefield of silence and passive aggression. But Mary refused to back down. She moved through her routines with quiet dignity, watering her plants, cooking her meals, humming old hymns under her breath. Each act of calmness was her resistance. A house divided. On Wednesday morning, Rebecca took it one step further. Mary came downstairs to find her old family photo, one of her favorites, lying face down on the floor. The glass was cracked. It was the picture of her, Tom, and a 6-year-old Ethan at Myrtle Beach. She picked it up carefully, her heart aching, then looked toward the living room. Rebecca sat on the couch scrolling her phone, acting like nothing had happened. "Did you drop this?" Mary asked softly. Rebecca didn't look up. Maybe it just fell. Mary set the frame gently on the counter. Things don't fall when they've been hanging for 15 years. Rebecca finally looked up, her eyes cold. "Maybe it's a sign, Mary. Maybe it's time to move on from the past." Mary stared at her for a long moment. "The past built this house. Don't forget that." Rebecca smirked. "We'll see who it belongs to soon enough." Mary felt a flicker of unease, but also resolve. She wasn't sure what Rebecca meant by that, but she knew it wasn't good. Legal steps. That afternoon, Mary went ahead with the plan she'd discussed with Linda. She visited a notary and officially filed a revocable living trust in her name. The paperwork stated clearly that no one else, not Ethan, not Rebecca, had any claim or authority over her property. The clerk who processed her documents smiled politely. "You're being smart, ma'am. You'd be surprised how many seniors lose their homes to family manipulation." Mary nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "I won't be one of them." When she got home, she placed the notarized copies in her lockbox and hid it under a loose floorboard in her closet. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Rebecca's revenge. But Rebecca wasn't the kind of woman to accept defeat quietly. That evening, when Ethan came home, he avoided his mother again. Mary knew something was coming. She could feel it. She didn't have to wait long. Rebecca cornered her in the hallway after dinner, her arms crossed tightly. "I heard you went to the county office again," she said flatly. "Are you spying on me now?" Mary asked, keeping her voice calm. "Oh, please." "Word gets around fast in this small town. People talk." Rebecca took a step closer. "So what are you doing, Mary? Trying to keep everything from Ethan? From your own son?" Mary's jaw tightened. "I'm protecting what I worked for. That's not the same thing." Rebecca's voice rose. "You're manipulating him. You've turned him against me." "No," Mary said softly. "You did that all by yourself." Rebecca's eyes flashed. "You think you're smarter than me because you've lived longer? Newsflash, Mary, this house will be ours sooner or later. I'll make sure of it." Mary's voice turned to steel. "You can threaten all you want, but you're the one who'll be leaving soon." Rebecca's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see about that." The sun torn in two. That night, Ethan came to her room. His face was weary, his shoulders slumped. "Mom, can we please not do this?" he said quietly. "I can't take this tension anymore." Mary looked at him with both love and disappointment. "Ethan, this isn't tension. This is disrespect. There's a difference." "She didn't mean to hit you," he said weakly. "She just gets frustrated." Mary's voice trembled, not with fear, but with pain. "And what about me, Ethan? You think I don't get frustrated? I buried your father, worked 2 jobs, and kept this house running so you'd always have a home, and now the woman you married thinks she can slap me and take what's mine." He flinched. "Mom, please don't make me choose," he whispered. Mary took a deep breath. "You already have, Ethan. You just don't realize it yet." He left the room in silence. Mary sat back on her bed, tears pricking her eyes. Losing her son's support hurt more than the slap ever could. But she couldn't surrender, not when everything she'd built was on the line. The police visit. 2 days later, a knock came at the door. Mary opened it to find a police officer standing on her porch. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked politely. "We received a call about a domestic disturbance." Her stomach dropped. "A what?" He checked his notepad. "Caller said there's been yelling, possible physical altercation between residents." Mary's eyes widened. "That's a lie." Rebecca appeared behind her, arms folded. "Officer, she's been unstable lately. I'm just worried about her safety." The audacity of it left Mary speechless. The officer looked between them. "Is everything okay here?" Mary straightened her shoulders. "Everything's fine, officer, except that I'm being harassed in my own home." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, I'm just here to make sure no one's in danger." Mary met his eyes. "Then you can note that the only danger here is manipulation." He nodded slowly. "Understood." He gave Rebecca a warning about making false reports and left. When the door closed, Rebecca's mask dropped. "You shouldn't have done that," she hissed. Mary stared at her coldly. "Neither should you." Strength from the past. That night, Mary sat at her kitchen table again, the same spot where she'd once cried after Tom's funeral, the same place where she'd written her first grocery list after paying off the mortgage. She looked up at the family photo she'd repaired earlier. The crack in the glass was still visible, but the picture beneath it was intact. That crack, she thought, was her life right now, damaged but unbroken. She whispered quietly to her husband's memory, "Tom, if you can hear me, give me the strength to finish this. I'm not going to let her win." A visit from Hope. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. It was Linda carrying a folder and a warm smile. "I've got good news," she said. "Your legal paperwork came through. Everything's finalized. You're untouchable now." Mary exhaled, the first real relief she'd felt in weeks. "Thank you, Linda. You've been my angel through this." Linda squeezed her hand. "Just remember, Mary, bullies always crumble when you stop feeding their fear." Mary smiled. "Then I guess it's time to let her starve." The calm before the storm. Over the next week, Rebecca grew more desperate. She'd slam doors, curse under her breath, complain loudly about living in a prison. Mary ignored it all. Every reaction would only give Rebecca what she wanted: control. Then one evening, Mary overheard Rebecca on the phone. Her voice was sharp, whispering but angry. "She's not going to give it up." "Fine, then I'll make her." Mary didn't know what that meant, but she knew the next battle was coming. She took a deep breath, closed her bedroom door, and wrote a note she kept by her bed. "No one can take from you what you built with love and honesty." She'd lived her whole life by that truth. And if Rebecca wanted war, she'd just find out what a quiet woman's strength really looked like. The following week began with a strange stillness, the kind of silence that isn't peace. It's the quiet before thunder. Mary could sense it the moment she stepped into the kitchen that Monday morning. The air felt charged, heavy with tension. The coffee pot was empty. The blinds were half drawn, and Rebecca's perfume still lingered faintly in the air, sharp and artificial. Ethan was at a job interview, and the house was, for now, just the two of them. Mary decided she'd spend the morning sorting through old papers, maybe dust the attic, anything to keep her mind occupied. But as she reached for her cleaning gloves, she noticed something odd. The drawer where she kept her important documents, bank papers, spare keys, even a few of Tom's old records, was unlocked and empty. Her stomach dropped. Her eyes darted around the room, searching frantically, hoping she'd simply misplaced them. But the folder was gone. "Rebecca," she called, her voice tight. "Did you move my papers?" From the living room came a slow, deliberate reply. "Maybe." Mary walked in. Rebecca was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, one leg crossed over the other, looking utterly calm. On the coffee table sat the missing folder. Mary's throat went dry. "That's private." Rebecca smiled. "You mean these?" "I found them while cleaning." "Those are legal documents," Mary said firmly. "Give them back." Rebecca stood, holding the folder just out of reach. "You know, Mary, you make this so difficult. You could have just added Ethan's name to the deed and saved us all this trouble." Mary took a step forward. "Put them down, Rebecca. Now." Rebecca's eyes glinted. "Or what? You'll call the cops on me again?" Mary didn't move. "If I have to," Rebecca smirked. "Go ahead. Let's see how that looks, an old woman calling the police on her own family. You'd look pathetic." Mary's jaw tightened. "You already made me look pathetic when you hit me. I won't let you make me powerless too." Rebecca's smile faltered just a bit. "You're overreacting." "I'm protecting myself," Mary said quietly. Rebecca set the folder down, but not gently. She slammed it onto the table, scattering papers everywhere. "Fine. Take your stupid papers, keep your stupid house, but don't expect Ethan to stick around when he realizes what kind of mother you really are." Mary stared at her, heart pounding, but said nothing. She knelt and began picking up the papers. Rebecca watched her for a moment, then turned sharply and walked out the front door, slamming it behind her. The silence that followed was so complete, Mary could hear the clock ticking again. The damage done. That night, when Ethan came home, Rebecca was waiting, tears in her eyes, her voice trembling in perfect rehearsed heartbreak. "She screamed at me, Ethan," she cried. "She told me to get out. She said I wasn't family." Ethan's face darkened. "Mom, did you really say that?" Mary looked between them, exhausted. "No, I didn't. She went through my private documents, Ethan. She took my property papers." Rebecca gasped dramatically. "I was trying to help. You've been acting unstable, locking yourself away, talking to lawyers. How do you think that makes us feel?" Mary's mouth fell open. "Unstable? You've been the one." "Enough!" Ethan shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "I can't take this anymore." He stormed off, grabbing his jacket and keys. The front door slammed again. For the first time since this nightmare began, Mary felt her knees buckle. She sat down slowly at the kitchen table, tears welling in her eyes. She whispered into the empty room, "What did I do to deserve this?" But deep down she knew the answer. She had raised a son who was good-hearted but blind, and now that blindness was being used against her. The breaking point. The next morning Mary woke to a noise, a faint clicking sound coming from the front door. When she stepped into the hallway, she froze. Rebecca was standing by the door, changing the locks. "What do you think you're doing?" Mary demanded, her voice shaking. Rebecca turned, calm as ever. "I told you this house needs new management." Ethan agrees. Mary's breath caught. "He what?" Rebecca smirked. "You'll find out soon enough. But for now, I need you to hand me the old keys. Let's not make this harder than it has to be." Mary's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but rage. "This is my home, Rebecca. You're trespassing." Rebecca's smile widened. "Not for long." And then she dropped the words like a grenade. "Ethan and I are filing to become your legal guardians. You're too old to manage this property on your own." Mary staggered back. "You're lying." "Am I?" Rebecca said sweetly. "You've been seen at the county office. You've been talking to lawyers. You're clearly anxious, paranoid. It won't be hard to prove you're not thinking clearly. Once the court approves it, we'll take care of you and the house." For a moment, Mary couldn't even breathe. It felt like her world was tilting sideways. Rebecca had found a new way to steal her life, through manipulation and the law. But what Rebecca didn't realize was that Mary was 2 steps ahead. The counter-move. That afternoon, Mary called Linda again. She explained everything, the threat, the locks, the talk of guardianship. Linda listened carefully, then said in a calm, firm voice, "Mary, they can't win this if we move fast. I'll file an elder protection report and alert your attorney. We'll also add your property to a protected trust that can't be challenged without court verification." Mary exhaled shakily. "So they can't take it?" Linda chuckled. "Not unless you suddenly forget your own name. And judging by how sharp you are, that's not happening anytime soon." Mary smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you, Linda. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You do what you've always done," Linda said. "Survive." The confrontation. That evening, Ethan came home, his face drawn and tired. "Mom, we need to talk." Mary folded her arms. "About what Rebecca told me?" He sighed. "She's worried about you. You've been talking to lawyers, locking things up, threatening us." "Threatening you?" she interrupted. "Ethan, I've done nothing but protect what's mine. She's twisting everything." He rubbed his temples. "Please, Mom, don't make this harder. Maybe if you just add me to the title, we can all live peacefully." Mary's voice turned cold. "That's not peace, Ethan. That's control." He hesitated. "You're overreacting." "No," she snapped, louder than she'd meant to. "I'm finally reacting. You think because I'm older I can't see what's happening. She's trying to erase me from my own life." Her words hit him hard. For a long time he just stood there, silent. Then quietly he said, "I need some air." And he left again. Mary's chest ached, but she didn't cry this time. She sat at the table, staring at the folder that had caused so much pain. Then she picked up her pen and wrote a letter, short, simple, and final. "To whom it may concern, I, Mary Ellen Parker, am of sound mind and fully capable of managing my property and personal affairs. I hereby state that no person, including my son, Ethan Parker, or his wife, Rebecca Parker, is authorized to act on my behalf. Signed and witnessed, October 2025. She sealed it in an envelope, placed it with her trust papers, and whispered to herself, "You can't take what isn't yours." The final spark. 2 nights later, Rebecca's last card fell. Mary came home from church to find her front lawn covered in for sale signs. Dozens of them, like some cruel joke. Neighbors had gathered, whispering, and in the middle of it stood Rebecca, her arms crossed, her expression smug. "You can't stop what's coming, Mary. This place is going on the market, one way or another." Mary looked around, her cheeks flushing, humiliated and furious. Then she spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Rebecca Parker, I am the sole legal owner of this property. You are hereby trespassing. If you do not leave this instant, I will have you removed by law enforcement." The crowd went silent. Rebecca's confidence faltered for the first time. "You wouldn't dare." Mary reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Try me." And this time she dialed 911. The weeks following Rebecca's outburst were like walking through a minefield. The air inside the house felt thick with unspoken rage and tension. Mary had made up her mind. She wasn't leaving and she wasn't giving up her house. But Rebecca had made up hers too. She was going to make Mary's life unbearable until she left on her own. It started small again. Rebecca stopped talking to Mary altogether, communicating only through cold notes stuck to the fridge. "Please keep your things off the kitchen counter. I'd appreciate it if you didn't interfere with the baby's nap schedule. We need more privacy in the evenings." Ethan tried to play peacemaker, but his patience was wearing thin. He was still unemployed, drowning in job rejections, and every conversation seemed to turn into an argument. One night, Mary overheard them in the living room. Rebecca's voice was sharp as a blade. "Ethan, you can't live like this forever. You're a grown man. Do you really want to raise our son in your mother's house?" Ethan's response was tired, defeated. "It's just until I find work. She's helping us." Helping, Rebecca scoffed. She's controlling us. You think she doesn't hold this house over your head? She'll never give it up, and she'll never let us live our own life. Mary sat in the hallway, hands gripping her knees to stop them from shaking. Every word felt like a knife. But she stayed silent, because deep down, she knew something Rebecca didn't. She had already taken steps to protect herself. She'd spoken with Mr. Howard, her lawyer, a week earlier. Together, they had drafted papers transferring ownership of her home into a living trust with very clear instructions. The property would remain solely under her control until her death, after which it would go to her grandson and not Ethan or Rebecca. When Mr. Howard asked if she was sure, she said yes without hesitation. Her grandson was innocent. He deserved stability and love, not the manipulation that had infected his parents. Now, when Mary looked at Rebecca, she no longer saw fear, she saw fire. Rebecca could scheme all she wanted. The house was legally out of reach. But Rebecca wasn't giving up. The confrontation. It was late on a Friday evening. The rain was pounding outside, thunder rumbling through the dark. Mary was in the kitchen preparing soup when she heard Rebecca's heels clacking down the hallway. "Mary," Rebecca called, her tone falsely sweet. "Can we talk?" Mary didn't look up. "If it's about redecorating again, Rebecca, I'm tired tonight." Rebecca leaned against the counter, her smile thin and dangerous. "Oh, it's not about redecorating. It's about your future." Mary turned slowly. "My future?" Rebecca crossed her arms. "Ethan and I have been talking. We think it's time you move into assisted living. There's a really nice community just outside town, Sunrise Meadows. They have doctors, activities, everything. It's perfect for someone your age." Mary set down the spoon. "You mean you want me gone?" Rebecca shrugged. "You said it, not me. Look, you've had a good run here, but it's time to pass things on. Ethan and I could renovate this place, raise our son properly, maybe even add a new deck." Mary's jaw tightened. "Rebecca, I built this life with my own hands. I buried my husband from this house. I raised Ethan here. You don't get to erase me." Rebecca smirked. "You think a piece of paper gives you power. Ethan's name is on some of the bills now. We'll figure it out one way or another." Mary's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. "You already tried taking my keys once. Do you really want to try again?" Rebecca's face darkened. "You're lucky Ethan's here, or what?" Mary interrupted, her voice low and steady. "You'll hit me again." The silence that followed was electric. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Rebecca's eyes flickered, a mix of shame and fury. Then Ethan walked in. "What's going on?" Mary looked at him sadly. "Ask your wife." Rebecca spun toward him, desperate. "She's lying again, Ethan. She's trying to turn you against me. I just want what's best for this family." Ethan rubbed his temples. "Enough. Both of you." Mary stepped back, her hands trembling. For the first time, she saw her son not as a boy she raised, but as a man caught in a web he didn't understand. "I think I'll go to my room," she said softly, and left them standing in the kitchen. Behind the closed door, she leaned against the wall and let out a shaky breath. She was done arguing, done trying to prove herself. From now on, her silence would speak for her, and her actions, already in motion, would finish the rest. The turning of the tide. The next morning, Rebecca woke to find an envelope on the kitchen table. It was addressed to Ethan and Rebecca Parker, written in Mary's delicate cursive. Inside was a single piece of paper. "This home is under legal trust. Any attempt to remove me from it will be considered trespassing and harassment under North Carolina law. I wish you both peace. But my home is no longer your concern. Mary E. Parker." Rebecca's face went white as she read it. Ethan's eyes widened. "Mom, what is this?" Mary stood at the doorway, dressed neatly, a calm authority in her posture. "It means this is my house, and it always will be." Rebecca's lips trembled, her composure cracking for the first time. You can't do this!" "Oh, I already did," Mary said. "You wanted control, Rebecca, but you forgot who you were dealing with." Without another word, Mary walked past them and out the door to church. For the first time in months, she held her head high. Rebecca stood frozen, gripping the letter like it might catch fire. Ethan sat down, face buried in his hands. For the first time, he realized what his mother had endured and what his wife had become. Mary's quiet revenge had begun. But the war wasn't over yet, because Rebecca wasn't done fighting, and Mary's final victory would come in a way no one saw coming. The morning after Mary delivered the letter felt different. The energy inside the Parker home had shifted. For the first time, Mary wasn't the one walking on eggshells. It was Rebecca. The younger woman moved around the kitchen with an angry quietness, slamming drawers, avoiding Mary's eyes. Ethan sat silently at the table, his head bowed, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. Mary didn't say a word. She simply brewed her tea, hummed softly, and went about her morning. For the first time in months, she felt peace. Small, fragile, but real. A family divided. By that weekend, the tension had become impossible to hide. Rebecca began calling her mother constantly, venting over the phone. "She's manipulating Ethan, Mom. She's trying to make me look like the villain." "Honey," her mother replied, "maybe just move out. You don't need this stress." "No," Rebecca snapped. "That house should be ours. She can't win." Rebecca's pride wouldn't let her walk away. She started digging, trying to find any weakness in Mary's trust documents. She even called a lawyer, but the response wasn't what she wanted. "Ma'am," the attorney said, "your mother-in-law has full legal ownership. You and your husband have no claim unless she voluntarily transfers it." Rebecca hung up the phone, her chest burning with rage. "How dare she muttered to herself. "That old woman thinks she can outsmart me." The public scene. A few days later, the family attended Ethan's job interview celebration dinner. He had finally landed a position with a construction firm after months of searching. They met at a cozy restaurant downtown, joined by a few of Ethan's friends. It should have been a happy evening. Mary even bought him a card and a tie, a simple, heartfelt gesture. But Rebecca, already simmering with resentment, couldn't hide her bitterness. During dinner, one of Ethan's co-workers mentioned how proud Mary must be. "She's been your rock, huh? You're lucky to have her," he said. Rebecca's forced smile cracked. "Oh yes, she's very involved," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Almost too involved." The table went awkwardly silent. Mary tried to diffuse it with a polite laugh, but Rebecca wasn't done. "You know," she continued, swirling her wine, "some people just don't know when to let go. It's like they can't stand seeing younger people move on, build their own life." Mary's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Ethan looked at her, eyes pleading silently for calm. Mary took a deep breath and said softly, "Rebecca, maybe tonight isn't the time." Rebecca slammed her glass down. "Oh, you'd love to control when and where people speak, wouldn't you?" The waiter stopped mid-step. Everyone turned. Mary felt the heat rise to her cheeks, not from shame but from disbelief. She stood up calmly. "I think I'll go home," she said, and left the restaurant without another word. Outside, the cold air hit her face like a slap, but she didn't cry. For the first time, she realized something. Rebecca's mask was cracking, and she was doing it all by herself. Rebecca's downfall. The next few weeks were chaos. Ethan tried to juggle his new job while dealing with the growing distance between his wife and his mother. Mary, however, had learned the power of silence and dignity. She didn't argue, she didn't react. She simply lived her life, tending to her garden, visiting her church group, and smiling whenever Rebecca tried to provoke her. And that drove Rebecca mad. She started making small, reckless mistakes. She shouted at Ethan in front of the baby. She posted bitter rants on social media, one of which caught the attention of her own real estate firm. The post read, "Living with controlling, manipulative old people is ruining my life. Some people don't deserve the homes they cling to." Within hours, her supervisor called her in. The company had strict professional conduct rules, and Rebecca's behavior was deemed unprofessional and reputationally damaging. They suspended her license for 60 days. When she came home that evening, her fury was volcanic. She threw her purse on the floor and screamed, "This is your fault, Mary." Mary, sitting quietly with her tea, didn't even flinch. "My fault?" she asked calmly. "For what? Your choices." Rebecca's face twisted. "You're smug. You think you've won. But Ethan won't stay here forever. We'll get this house one way or another." Mary set her cup down gently. "Then maybe it's time you find another home, Rebecca." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Are you kicking us out?" "I'm giving you an opportunity," Mary said softly, "to start your own life. Without me." For a moment, Rebecca looked stunned. Then her voice turned icy. "You'll regret this." But as she stormed away, something inside Mary whispered, "No, I won't. Ethan's awakening." That night, after Rebecca locked herself in the bedroom, Ethan came to the kitchen where Mary was sitting quietly by the window. "Mom," he said in a low, tired voice, "I'm sorry." Mary looked up, startled. "For what, sweetheart?" "For not seeing it sooner," he said. "For letting her talk to you that way. For not being the man Dad would have wanted me to be." Mary's eyes softened. "Ethan, you were trying to keep peace. That's not weakness." He shook his head. "No, I was avoiding responsibility. You've been nothing but generous. And she's been cruel." Mary reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's not too late to make things right." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I think I'm done trying to fix her. I just want peace for my son." The day of reckoning. 2 weeks later, Rebecca made one final attempt to regain control. She came home with papers in her hand, copies of a complaint she had filed claiming Mary was mentally unfit to live alone and that the property should be placed under family supervision. But what she didn't know was that Mary's lawyer, Mr. Howard, had already anticipated such a move. When Rebecca showed up to court, smug and self-assured, she was stunned to find Mary and Mr. Howard already waiting, with the trust documents, medical reports, and community statements from neighbors and church members describing Mary as healthy, independent, and mentally sound. The judge took less than 15 minutes to dismiss the case. He looked at Rebecca sternly. "Mrs. Parker, this court does not appreciate attempts to misuse elder protection laws for personal gain. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions." Rebecca's face turned crimson. She could barely breathe as she walked out of the courtroom. Reporters from the local paper, who covered elder protection cases, were standing outside. One of them even snapped a photo. The next morning, the headline read, "Daughter-in-law's claim against elderly homeowner dismissed. Judge warns against abuse of legal system." Rebecca's reputation in the community crumbled overnight. The final goodbye. A week later, Rebecca packed her bags. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She simply told Ethan she needed space and took the baby to her mother's for a while. Mary didn't stop her. She didn't gloat. She simply wished her well and closed the door behind her. The house was quiet again. Ethan stayed, sitting on the porch steps that evening. "Mom," he said, "I don't know what happens next." Mary smiled softly. "Then maybe for once we let life decide." They watched the sunset together, mother and son. The same porch where he once played with toy airplanes. The roses Mary had planted years ago were blooming again. A new beginning. Months passed. Ethan found stability at his new job, and Rebecca eventually filed for separation. Though the marriage ended painfully, Ethan and Mary agreed to share custody of the little boy. Every weekend, laughter filled the house again, the same kind that used to echo years ago when Ethan was small. Mary often caught herself looking out at the garden, remembering the day she was slapped, the day she thought her world had ended. But it hadn't. It had only changed her, made her stronger, wiser, and prouder than ever. She had lost her fear but kept her kindness. She had been betrayed, but she had not been broken. As she tucked her grandson into bed one night, he whispered, "Grandma, this is the best house in the world." Mary smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, "because it's built on love, not greed." The final chapter. The air in North Carolina had that soft, golden calm that only comes in early autumn. When the heat eases, the leaves begin to turn, and the world feels like it's taking a deep breath. For Mary Ellen Parker, it was the first fall in years that truly felt like peace. Her home was quiet, but not empty. Her grandson, Noah, had spent the weekend there, filling every corner of the house with laughter and the sound of little feet running down the hall. Now he was gone. Ethan had picked him up that morning, and Mary stood in the kitchen with her tea, looking out at the backyard where the roses bloomed again. She touched the small silver locket around her neck, a photo of her husband inside, smiling as if he were proud. "We made it, Henry," she whispered. "We really did." The letter. A few weeks after Rebecca left, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting was neat, Rebecca's. For a long time, Mary didn't open it. Part of her didn't want to, afraid it would be filled with blame and venom. But one quiet evening, curiosity got the better of her. Inside was a short, unexpected note. "Mary, I've had a lot of time to think. Losing everything forced me to see myself clearly. I'm not proud of what I did. To you, to Ethan, to my son. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. I let anger and pride destroy things that should have been built on love. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry." Rebecca. Mary sat with the letter in her lap, eyes glistening. She didn't cry from pain this time. She cried because she finally felt release. There it was, the one thing she never thought she'd receive, an apology. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her Bible. Not to forget, but to forgive. Because forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about letting the other person off the hook. It was about freeing herself from the weight of hate. A visit from Ethan. One Saturday morning, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He looked lighter than Mary had seen him in years, relaxed, his smile genuine. "Mom," he said, setting a small box on the table, "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a framed photo, a candid shot of Mary and Noah baking cookies in the kitchen. Flour covered both their hands, and their faces were bright with laughter. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ethan sat down. "You know, Noah's been asking questions lately, about family, about what it means to have a home." Mary nodded. "He'll figure it out. He's got good people teaching him." He smiled. "Mom, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You handled everything with more grace than anyone else could have." Mary chuckled softly. Grace, maybe. But there were days I wanted to throw her out the door myself. Ethan laughed, a deep, familiar sound that warmed her heart. Then he grew quiet. "Rebecca's getting help. Counseling. She said she's trying to be a better mom. I don't know what the future looks like for us, but I want peace. For Noah. For all of us." Mary reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's all I ever wanted too," she said. The garden. Later that afternoon, Mary went outside to tend to her garden. The roses were her favorite, red, wild, and full of life. She often thought of them as mirrors of herself, pruned by hardship but still blooming. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, waved from across the fence. "Mary, the house looks beautiful. You've still got the best roses on the street." Mary laughed. "Oh, they've been through worse storms than this old house." Mrs. Carter smiled. "You always come out stronger, don't you?" Mary looked at the roses again, the sunlight glinting through their petals. "I guess I learned that you can't control what people do to you," she said softly. "But you can control how you grow afterward." The 4th of July. Months passed, and by summer Mary's life had blossomed again. Ethan and Noah visited often. The three of them decided to celebrate the 4th of July together, just like when Ethan was a boy. They grilled burgers in the backyard, played music, and lit sparklers as dusk fell. Noah ran across the lawn shouting, "Grandma, look! It's freedom fireworks." Mary smiled because he was right. Freedom. Not just from control or fear or conflict, but from bitterness. As fireworks exploded above the neighborhood, Mary felt something deep in her heart, not triumph, but peace. She turned to Ethan and said, "You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel light, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ethan smiled. "You are, Mom. You always were." They watched the sky together, red, white, and blue filling the air, a quiet symbol that freedom doesn't always come from wars or revolutions. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground with grace. Epilogue. The house that love built. Years later, when Noah was a teenager, he asked his grandmother why she never sold the old house. Mary smiled. "Because this isn't just wood and brick, sweetheart. It's the story of how we survived. It's proof that love can outlast anger, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace." Noah nodded. "I'll never let it go either." And Mary knew, in that moment, she had done what she was meant to do. She hadn't just protected her home. She'd protected her family's heart. The house stood quietly under the Carolina sun. The same porch, the same roses, the same woman who had once been slapped and humiliated but had risen higher than her pain. Because in the end, real strength isn't about fighting back. It's about rising above. The end. Rebecca's face twisted. "You're smug. You think you've won, but Ethan won't stay here forever. We'll get this house one way or another." Mary set her cup down gently. "Then maybe it's time you find another home, Rebecca." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Are you kicking us out?" "I'm giving you an opportunity," Mary said softly, "to start your own life. Without me." For a moment, Rebecca looked stunned. Then her voice turned icy. "You'll regret this." But as she stormed away, something inside Mary whispered, "No, I won't." Ethan's awakening. That night, after Rebecca locked herself in the bedroom, Ethan came to the kitchen where Mary was sitting quietly by the window. "Mom," he said in a low, tired voice, "I'm sorry." Mary looked up, startled. "For what, sweetheart?" "For not seeing it sooner," he said. "For letting her talk to you that way. For not being the man Dad would have wanted me to be." Mary's eyes softened. "Ethan, you were trying to keep peace." "That's not weakness." He shook his head. "No, I was avoiding responsibility. You've been nothing but generous, and she's been cruel." Mary reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's not too late to make things right." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I think I'm done trying to fix her. I just want peace for my son." The day of reckoning. 2 weeks later, Rebecca made one final attempt to regain control. She came home with papers in her hand, copies of a complaint she had filed claiming Mary was mentally unfit to live alone and that the property should be placed under family supervision. But what she didn't know was that Mary's lawyer, Mr. Howard, had already anticipated such a move. When Rebecca showed up to court, smug and self-assured, she was stunned to find Mary and Mr. Howard already waiting, with the trust documents, medical reports, and community statements from neighbors and church members describing Mary as healthy, independent, and mentally sound. The judge took less than 15 minutes to dismiss the case. He looked at Rebecca sternly. "Mrs. Parker, this court does not appreciate attempts to misuse elder protection laws for personal gain. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions." Rebecca's face turned crimson. She could barely breathe as she walked out of the courtroom. Reporters from the local paper, who covered elder protection cases, were standing outside. One of them even snapped a photo. The next morning, the headline read, Daughter-in-law's claim against elderly homeowner dismissed. Judge warns against abuse of legal system. Rebecca's reputation in the community crumbled overnight. The final goodbye. A week later, Rebecca packed her bags. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She simply told Ethan she needed space and took the baby to her mother's for a while. Mary didn't stop her. She didn't gloat. She simply wished her well and closed the door behind her. The house was quiet again. Ethan stayed, sitting on the porch steps that evening. "Mom," he said, "I don't know what happens next." Mary smiled softly. "Then maybe, for once, we let life decide." They watched the sunset together, mother and son, the same porch where he once played with toy airplanes. The roses Mary had planted years ago were blooming again, a new beginning. Months passed. Ethan found stability at his new job, and Rebecca eventually filed for separation. Though the marriage ended painfully, Ethan and Mary agreed to share custody of the little boy. Every weekend, laughter filled the house again, the same kind that used to echo years ago when Ethan was small. Mary often caught herself looking out at the garden, remembering the day she was slapped, the day she thought her world had ended. But it hadn't. It had only changed her, made her stronger, wiser, and prouder than ever. She had lost her fear but kept her kindness. She had been betrayed, but she had not been broken. As she tucked her grandson into bed one night, he whispered, "Grandma, this is the best house in the world." Mary smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, "because it's built on love, not greed." The final chapter. The air in North Carolina had that soft, golden calm that only comes in early autumn. When the heat eases, the leaves begin to turn, and the world feels like it's taking a deep breath. For Mary Ellen Parker, it was the first fall in years that truly felt like peace. Her home was quiet, but not empty. Her grandson Noah had spent the weekend there, filling every corner of the house with laughter and the sound of little feet running down the hall. Now he was gone. Ethan had picked him up that morning, and Mary stood in the kitchen with her tea, looking out at the backyard where the roses bloomed again. She touched the small silver locket around her neck, a photo of her husband inside, smiling as if he were proud. "We made it, Henry," she whispered. "We really did." The letter. A few weeks after Rebecca left, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting was neat, Rebecca's. For a long time, Mary didn't open it. Part of her didn't want to, afraid it would be filled with blame and venom. But one quiet evening, curiosity got the better of her. Inside was a short, unexpected note. "Mary, I've had a lot of time to think. Losing everything forced me to see myself clearly. I'm not proud of what I did. To you, to Ethan, to my son. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. I let anger and pride destroy things that should have been built on love. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry. Rebecca." Mary sat with the letter in her lap, eyes glistening. She didn't cry from pain this time. She cried because she finally felt release. There it was. The one thing she never thought she'd receive. An apology. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her Bible. Not to forget, but to forgive. Because forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about letting the other person off the hook. It was about freeing herself from the weight of hate. A visit from Ethan. One Saturday morning, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He looked lighter than Mary had seen him in years, relaxed, his smile genuine. "Mom," he said, setting a small box on the table. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a framed photo, a candid shot of Mary and Noah baking cookies in the kitchen. Flour covered both their hands, and their faces were bright with laughter. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ethan sat down. "You know, Noah's been asking questions lately, about family, about what it means to have a home." Mary nodded. "He'll figure it out. He's got good people teaching him." He smiled. "Mom, I want you to know I'm proud of you." You handled everything with more grace than anyone else could have. Mary chuckled softly. Grace, maybe. But there were days I wanted to throw her out the door myself. Ethan laughed, a deep, familiar sound that warmed her heart. Then he grew quiet. Rebecca's getting help. Counseling. She said she's trying to be a better mom. I don't know what the future looks like for us, but I want peace. For Noah. For all of us. Mary reached across the table and squeezed his hand. That's all I ever wanted too, she said. The garden. Later that afternoon, Mary went outside to tend to her garden. The roses were her favorite, red, wild, and full of life. She often thought of them as mirrors of herself, pruned by hardship, but still blooming. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, waved from across the fence. Mary, the house looks beautiful. You've still got the best roses on the street. Mary laughed. Oh, they've been through worse storms than this old house. Mrs. Carter smiled. You always come out stronger, don't you? Mary looked at the roses again, the sunlight glinting through their petals. I guess I learned that you can't control what people do to you, she said softly. But you can control how you grow afterward. The 4th of July. Months passed, and by summer, Mary's life had blossomed again. Ethan and Noah visited often. The three of them decided to celebrate the 4th of July together, just like when Ethan was a boy. They grilled burgers in the backyard, played music, and lit sparklers as dusk fell. Noah ran across the lawn shouting, Grandma, look! It's freedom fireworks. Mary smiled, because he was right. Freedom, not just from control or fear or conflict, but from bitterness. As fireworks exploded above the neighborhood, Mary felt something deep in her heart. Not triumph, but peace. She turned to Ethan and said, You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel light. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Ethan smiled. You are, Mom. You always were. They watched the sky together, red, white, and blue filling the air. A quiet symbol that freedom doesn't always come from wars or revolutions. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground with grace. Epilogue. The house that love built. Years later, when Noah was a teenager, he asked his grandmother why she never sold the old house. Mary smiled. Because this isn't just wood and brick, sweetheart. It's the story of how we survived. It's proof that love can outlast anger, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace. Noah nodded. I'll never let it go either. And Mary knew in that moment she had done what she was meant to do. She hadn't just protected her home, she'd protected her family's heart. The house stood quietly under the Carolina sun. The same porch, the same roses, the same woman who had once been slapped and humiliated but had risen higher than her pain. Because in the end, real strength isn't about fighting back. It's about rising above. The end. Mary, sitting quietly with her tea, didn't even flinch. My fault? She asked calmly. For what? Your choices. Rebecca's face twisted. You're smug. You think you've won. But Ethan won't stay here forever. We'll get this house one way or another. Mary set her cup down gently. Then maybe it's time you find another home, Rebecca. Rebecca's eyes widened. Are you kicking us out? I'm giving you an opportunity, Mary said softly, to start your own life. Without me. For a moment, Rebecca looked stunned. Then her voice turned icy. You'll regret this. But as she stormed away, something inside Mary whispered, No, I won't. Ethan's awakening. That night, after Rebecca locked herself in the bedroom, Ethan came to the kitchen where Mary was sitting quietly by the window. Mom, he said in a low, tired voice, I'm sorry. Mary looked up, startled. For what, sweetheart? For not seeing it sooner, he said. For letting her talk to you that way. For not being the man Dad would have wanted me to be. Mary's eyes softened. Ethan, you were trying to keep peace. That's not weakness. He shook his head. No, I was avoiding responsibility. You've been nothing but generous. And she's been cruel." Mary reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's not too late to make things right." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I think I'm done trying to fix her. I just want peace for my son." The day of reckoning. 2 weeks later, Rebecca made one final attempt to regain control. She came home with papers in her hand, copies of a complaint she had filed claiming Mary was mentally unfit to live alone and that the property should be placed under family supervision. But what she didn't know was that Mary's lawyer, Mr. Howard, had already anticipated such a move. When Rebecca showed up to court, smug and self-assured, she was stunned to find Mary and Mr. Howard already waiting, with the trust documents, medical reports, and community statements from neighbors and church members describing Mary as healthy, independent, and mentally sound. The judge took less than 15 minutes to dismiss the case. He looked at Rebecca sternly. "Mrs. Parker, this court does not appreciate attempts to misuse elder protection laws for personal gain. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions." Rebecca's face turned crimson. She could barely breathe as she walked out of the courtroom. Reporters from the local paper, who covered elder protection cases, were standing outside. One of them even snapped a photo. The next morning, the headline read, "Daughter-in-law's claim against elderly homeowner dismissed. Judge warns against abuse of legal system." Rebecca's reputation in the community crumbled overnight. The final goodbye. A week later, Rebecca packed her bags. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She simply told Ethan she needed space and took the baby to her mother's for a while. Mary didn't stop her. She didn't gloat. She simply wished her well and closed the door behind her. The house was quiet again. Ethan stayed, sitting on the porch steps that evening. "Mom," he said, "I don't know what happens next." Mary smiled softly. "Then maybe for once we let life decide." They watched the sunset together, mother and son. The same porch where he once played with toy airplanes. The roses Mary had planted years ago were blooming again. A new beginning. Months passed. Ethan found stability at his new job, and Rebecca eventually filed for separation. Though the marriage ended painfully, Ethan and Mary agreed to share custody of the little boy. Every weekend, laughter filled the house again, the same kind that used to echo years ago when Ethan was small. Mary often caught herself looking out at the garden, remembering the day she was slapped, the day she thought her world had ended. But it hadn't. It had only changed her, made her stronger, wiser, and prouder than ever. She had lost her fear but kept her kindness. She had been betrayed, but she had not been broken. As she tucked her grandson into bed one night, he whispered, "Grandma, this is the best house in the world." Mary smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly, "because it's built on love, not greed." The final chapter. The air in North Carolina had that soft, golden calm that only comes in early autumn. When the heat eases, the leaves begin to turn, and the world feels like it's taking a deep breath. For Mary Ellen Parker, it was the first fall in years that truly felt like peace. Her home was quiet, but not empty. Her grandson, Noah, had spent the weekend there, filling every corner of the house with laughter and the sound of little feet running down the hall. Now he was gone. Ethan had picked him up that morning, and Mary stood in the kitchen with her tea, looking out at the backyard where the roses bloomed again. She touched the small silver locket around her neck, a photo of her husband inside, smiling as if he were proud. "We made it, Henry," she whispered. "We really did." The letter. A few weeks after Rebecca left, a plain envelope arrived in the mail. The handwriting was neat, Rebecca's. For a long time, Mary didn't open it. Part of her didn't want to, afraid it would be filled with blame and venom. But one quiet evening, curiosity got the better of her. Inside was a short, unexpected note. "Mary, I've had a lot of time to think. losing everything forced me to see myself clearly. I'm not proud of what I did. To you, to Ethan, to my son. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. I let anger and pride destroy things that should have been built on love. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say I'm sorry. Rebecca, Mary sat with the letter in her lap, eyes glistening. She didn't cry from pain this time. She cried because she finally felt release. There it was, the one thing she never thought she'd receive, an apology. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her Bible. Not to forget, but to forgive. Because forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about letting the other person off the hook. It was about freeing herself from the weight of hate. A visit from Ethan. One Saturday morning, Ethan stopped by unexpectedly. He looked lighter than Mary had seen him in years, relaxed, his smile genuine. "Mom," he said, setting a small box on the table. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a framed photo, a candid shot of Mary and Noah baking cookies in the kitchen. Flour covered both their hands, and their faces were bright with laughter. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ethan sat down. "You know, Noah's been asking questions lately, about family, about what it means to have a home." Mary nodded. "He'll figure it out. He's got good people teaching him." He smiled. "Mom, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. You handled everything with more grace than anyone else could have." Mary chuckled softly. Grace, maybe. But there were days I wanted to throw her out the door myself. Ethan laughed, a deep, familiar sound that warmed her heart. Then he grew quiet. "Rebecca's getting help. Counseling. She said she's trying to be a better mom. I don't know what the future looks like for us, but I want peace. For Noah. For all of us." Mary reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's all I ever wanted too," she said. The garden. Later that afternoon, Mary went outside to tend to her garden. The roses were her favorite, red, wild, and full of life. She often thought of them as mirrors of herself, pruned by hardship but still blooming. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, waved from across the fence. "Mary, the house looks beautiful. You've still got the best roses on the street." Mary laughed. "Oh, they've been through worse storms than this old house." Mrs. Carter smiled. "You always come out stronger, don't you?" Mary looked at the roses again, the sunlight glinting through their petals. "I guess I learned that you can't control what people do to you," she said softly. "But you can control how you grow afterward." The 4th of July. Months passed, and by summer Mary's life had blossomed again. Ethan and Noah visited often. The three of them decided to celebrate the 4th of July together, just like when Ethan was a boy. They grilled burgers in the backyard, played music, and lit sparklers as dusk fell. Noah ran across the lawn shouting, "Grandma, look! It's freedom fireworks." Mary smiled because he was right. Freedom. Not just from control or fear or conflict, but from bitterness. As fireworks exploded above the neighborhood, Mary felt something deep in her heart, not triumph, but peace. She turned to Ethan and said, "You know, for the first time in a long time, I feel light, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ethan smiled. "You are, Mom. You always were." They watched the sky together, red, white, and blue filling the air, a quiet symbol that freedom doesn't always come from wars or revolutions. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground with grace. Epilogue. The house that love built. Years later, when Noah was a teenager, he asked his grandmother why she never sold the old house. Mary smiled. "Because this isn't just wood and brick, sweetheart. It's the story of how we survived. It's proof that love can outlast anger, and that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace." Noah nodded. "I'll never let it go either." And Mary knew, in that moment, she had done what she was meant to do. She hadn't just protected her home. She'd protected her family's heart. The house stood quietly under the Carolina sun. The same porch, the same roses, the same woman who had once been slapped and humiliated but had risen higher than her pain. Because in the end, real strength isn't about fighting back. It's about rising above. The end.